Developed bodies in man. Now we can begin with looking at the diagram of the 4 bodies of man, when they are fully developed. Such a person, having these bodies developed in them, is in the right order, where internal things rule over outer things. To use Christian terminology, the celestial or divine body rules over the spiritual body body rules over the natural body, and the natural body rules over the corporeal or physical body. It is now possible to examine the formal teaching about the 4 bodies of man, as it was originally given by Gurdjieff. We need, however, to understand that the form in which it was given is highly compressed. It is a first pass at the entire subject, and so needs to be noted that many other ideas enter into this concept, and several modifications are necessary in order to understand this subject more fully. A general outline of the idea can therefore be presented, where imagine a traveler about to give a lecture on an unknown country that they themselves have visited. They may at first give only a general synopsis. Many additions can be made and modifications to the original idea, so for now we can remind ourselves that in the Gospels there is evidence that one must acquire a new body. It is expressed in terms that the individual must be reborn before they can see the kingdom of heaven. A person is materially incarnate into a physical body, but someone who lives in their physical body must acquire a second or psychological body. Once we acquire this, we are then reborn and then supposed to be baptized as such. Everyone understands that a person is not simply their physical body. What is really their true self is the psychological person that lives within the physical body. The formation of further bodies refers therefore to the psychological, and not to the physical person. They refer to the centers in man that are psychological. The organization of the centers constitutes the basis of the formation of further bodies that can survive the death of the physical body. Therefore, if an individual dwells in chaos psychologically, then nothing is organized in them, apart from their physical body. If one is nothing but a mass of contradictory eyes, then they have no real permanent eye in them. We need to be aware that in understanding this subject, difficulties have to be faced, and that great knowledge is not easy to understand. This work becomes real and living to a person, and so well organized in them that they act from the work, and remember themselves in daily life. They act from the work, and no longer from themselves. There is something organized in them, and this is second body. But for this to take place, a person must never forget what they are doing in the work. They must reach a state such that, in whatever direction they are twisted and turned, however badly they are treated, they never lose sight of the work, and never act, save through the medium of the work. We know that this work is to create something new in us, to give new ways of taking things, new ways of thinking about life. This is the whole objective of the work. The whole object of the work is to create something new in us, a new person in place of the old one. If we are able to grasp what this means, then we can understand what the creation of a second body is. At a meeting of a group which Ouspensky attended, one of those present asked Gurdjieff, "Can it be said that man possesses immortality?" The response given was that immortality is one of the qualities we ascribe to people, without having a sufficient understanding of its meaning. Other qualities of this kind are individuality, in the sense of an inner unity, a permanent and unchangeable I, consciousness and will. All these qualities can belong to us. He emphasized the word can, but this certainly does not mean that they do belong to us, or belong to each and every one. In order to understand what man is at the present time, at our present level of development, it is necessary to imagine to a certain extent what we can be, what we can attain. Only by understanding the correct sequence of development possible, will people cease to ascribe to themselves what at present they do not possess, and what perhaps they can only acquire after great effort and great labor. According to an ancient teaching, traces of which may be found in many systems, old and new, an individual who has attained the full development possible for man, a man in the full sense of the word, consists of 4 bodies. These 4 bodies are composed of substances which are finer and finer, mutually interpenetrating one another, and form 4 independent organisms, standing in a definite relationship to one another, but capable of independent action. The reason why it is possible for 4 bodies to exist is that the human organism, the physical body, has such a complex organization that under certain conditions, a new independent organism can grow within, affording a more convenient and a more responsive instrument for the activity of consciousness than our physical body. The consciousness manifested in this new body is capable of governing, or having full power and control over our physical body. In this second body, under certain conditions, a third body can then grow, again having characteristics of its own. The consciousness manifested in this third body has full power and control over the first two bodies, and the third body possesses the possibility of acquiring knowledge, inaccessible either to the first or to the second body. In the third body, under certain conditions, a fourth can grow, which differs as much from the third, as the third differs from the second, and the second from the first. The consciousness manifested in the fourth body has full control over the first three bodies and of itself. These four bodies are defined in different teachings in various ways. The first is our physical body, in Christian terminology, the carnal body. The second, in Christian terminology, is the natural body. The third is the spiritual body, and the fourth, in the terminology of esoteric Christianity, is the divine body. In the terminology of certain Eastern teachings, the first body is the carriage, our body, the second body is the horse, all feelings and desires, the third is the driver, our mind, and the fourth is the master within, a permanent I, consciousness and will. Such comparisons and parallels may be found in most systems, and teachings which recognize something more in man than the physical body. But almost all of these teachings, while repeating in a more or less familiar form the definitions and divisions of the ancient teaching, have forgotten or omitted its most important feature, which is that man is not born with the finer bodies, and that they can only be artificially cultivated in us, provided that favorable conditions, both internal and external, are present. The second body is not an indispensable implement for us. Someone can live quite well without a second body. Their physical body possesses all the functions necessary for life. This applies still more, of course, to the third body and the fourth body. Ordinarily, we do not possess those bodies, or their corresponding functions. The reasons for this are first, the fact that the physical body works with the same substances of which the higher bodies are composed, only these substances are not crystallized in us, and so do not belong to us. Then secondly, it has all the functions analogous to those of higher bodies, though of course they differ from them considerably. The chief difference between one possessing the physical body, and the other functions undeveloped, and another possessing the developed functions of all four bodies, is that in the first case, the physical body governs all the other functions. In other words, everything is governed by the body which, in its turn, is governed by the external influences of life. Such a person is governed by life. In the second case, the command or control function emanates from higher bodies, and so that individual is no longer governed by outer life. The functions of the physical body may be represented as parallel to the developed and crystallized functions of the four bodies in the manner illustrated here. Figure 2 represents the parallel functions of a man of physical body, with undeveloped functions, then a man of four bodies in whom all the functions are developed. In the first case, in relation to the undeveloped functions of a man of physical body only, the automaton or man-machine depends upon external influences, and the next three functions depend upon the physical body, and the external influences that it receives. Changing desires and aversions, of I want, I don't want, I like and I don't like, in other words functions occupying the place of the second body, depend upon accidental shocks and influences. Thinking, which corresponds to the functions of the third body, is an entirely mechanical process. Will is absent in ordinary mechanical man, who has desires only, and a greater or lesser permanence of desires and wishes, referred to as a strong or a weak will. In the second case, in relation to the developed functions of the four bodies, the working of the physical body depends upon the influences of the other or higher bodies. Instead of the discordant and often contradictory activity of different desires, there is one single I, which is whole, indivisible, and permanent. There is individuality, dominating the physical body and its desires, and able to overcome both its reluctance and its resistance. Instead of the mechanical process of thinking, there is consciousness. And there is will, a power, not merely composed of various, often contradictory desires belonging to different I's, but issuing from consciousness, and governed by individuality, or a single and permanent I. Only such a will can be called free, for it is independent of accident, and cannot be altered or directed from without. An Eastern teaching describes the functions of the four bodies, their gradual growth and the conditions of this growth, in the following manner. Let us imagine a vessel or a retort filled with various metallic powders. The powders are not in any way connected with each other, and every accidental change in the position of the retort or vessel, every accidental knock it receives, changes the relative position of the loose powders. If the retort be shaken or tapped with the finger, then the powder which was at the top may appear at the bottom or in the middle, while the one which was at the bottom may appear at the top. There is nothing permanent in the position of these powders, and under such conditions there can be nothing permanent. This is an exact picture of our psychic life, which changes at every moment. Each succeeding moment new influences may change the position of the powder which is at the top, and put in its place another, which is absolutely its opposite. Science calls this state of the powders the state of mechanical mixture. The essential characteristic of the interrelation of the powders to one another, in this kind of mixture, is the instability of these interrelations, and their variability. It is impossible to stabilize the interrelation of powders in a state of merely mechanical mixture. But the powders can be fused. Because the nature of these powders makes that possible. To do this, a special kind of fire must be lit under the retort, which by heating and melting the powders, finally fuses them together. Fused in this manner, the powders will be no longer in mechanical mixture, but a state of chemical union. And now, they can no longer be separated by those simple methods which separated them, and made them change places, when they were in a state of mechanical mixture. The contents of the retort have become indivisible and individual, through fusion. This is a picture of the formation of the second body. The fire, by means of which fusion is attained, is produced through friction, which, in its turn, is produced in us by the struggle between yes and no within. If someone gives way to themselves at all times, if they give way to all of their desires and moods, to their changing thoughts, there will be no inner struggle within them, no friction, and so no fire. But if, for the sake of attaining a definite aim, they struggle with themselves, if they struggle with the thoughts and desires that hinder them, they will then create a fire which can gradually transform their inner world into one single whole. Returning then to our example. The chemical compound obtained by fusion of the powders in the retort possesses certain qualities, comparable to a certain specific gravity, a certain electrical conductivity and so on. These qualities constitute the characteristics of the substance in question. But by means of work upon it of a certain kind, the number of these characteristics may be increased, that is, the fused alloy may be given new properties, which did not primarily belong to it. It may be possible to create inner changes in it, to magnetize it, to make it radioactive, and so on. The process of imparting new properties to the fused alloy corresponds to the process of the formation of the third body, and of the acquisition of new knowledge and powers, with the help of the third body. When the third body has been formed and has acquired all the properties, powers, and knowledge possible for it, there remains the problem of fixing and directing this knowledge and these powers, because, having been imparted to it by influences of a certain kind, they may be taken away, by these very same influences, or by others. By means of a special kind of work, the acquired properties can be made the permanent and inalienable possession of the third body. The process of fixing these acquired properties corresponds to the process of the formation of the fourth body, through which the master works. Only one who possesses 4 fully developed bodies can be called a man in the full sense of the word. This man possesses many properties, which ordinary man does not possess, and one of these properties is immortality. All religions, and all ancient teachings contain the idea, that by acquiring this fourth or divine body, man acquires immortality, and they all contain indications of the ways to acquire the fourth body, which is, immortality, our heavenly body. In this regard, certain teachings compare man with a house of 4 rooms. Where man lives in one room, the smallest, and the poorest of all, until he is told of it, he does not suspect the existence of the other rooms, which are filled with treasures. When he does learn of this, he begins to seek the keys of these rooms, particularly the fourth, the most important room of all. And when a man has found his way into this room, he really becomes the master of his own house, for only then does the house belong to him, wholly and forever. The fourth room gives man true immortality, and all religious teachings strive to show the way to it. There are a great number of ways or paths, some shorter, some longer, some harder and some easier, But all, without exception, lead or strive to lead, in one direction, that is to immortality, the stairway to heaven or ascension.